Welcome in, everybody, to Betting Pros. It's time to place your bets. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pisapia, and we've got a treat for you today. Oh, baby, it's good. We are talking UFC 291. We got a great fight coming up this weekend. And, you know, speaking of the fight game, we thought we'd bring in somebody who might know a thing or two about it. He's a former champion, a former Olympian. He's the pride of Lafayette. He is also a guy you might know from the Volume Network, from ESPN, always doing the commentary. He's the one, the only Daniel Cormier, and I can't believe he's hanging out with me. DC, are you excited for the fight coming up? And do you get the butterflies still when the fight's coming around? Do you still get that? Because I always talk about the ex-players, ex-fighters, things like that. Do you still get the little butterflies as you get closer and the excitement when we get to this fight?
I get the creepies. I get the willies on the arm. Nothing like a UFC title fight. Like, I always sit there next to Joe and John, and I look to my left, and I go, there is nothing like a UFC championship fight. And they're both always giddy because you get like the hair on your arm standing up. And honestly, with the nerves that I feel calling the fights, I can't believe that I did it for so long in those moments. Because if I had to step outside of myself and see me in there, I don't know if I would have had the nerve to kind of go through it. It's crazy.
Well, we're going to talk to Daniel about his take on the main event. And then later in the show, we're going to bring in our good friend Mike Iurato, Mad Lab, who was on the show a couple weeks ago, one of the great betting analysts for MMA. He's going to give us picks, but Daniel's going to give us a breakdown. And I want to talk about this because Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, this is a duo that squared off a few years ago. 5 years, actually. It's been a while since these two really locked horns. And it was a great fight. There was a fourth round KO, very competitive fight between the two of these guys. And you know, one of the breakdowns I saw was really interesting where Poirier was able, because he's a southpaw, he was able to kind of keep to the outer side of Justin Gaethje, right? So he was able to avoid some of those kicks. And then eventually he had a little counter for those kicks, those big, heavy kicks that Gaethje is capable of. You saw Poirier hit him with a couple strikes there, being able to basically counterpunch that. When you have so much time between fights, between two guys who put up a really good contest before, and you kind of already know what the strategy is, how does that evolve over time between two fighters? Before we even get to the breakdown of these two guys specifically, just the time these guys have spent since that last fight, how does that change what you do in terms of game plan?
I just think that they both have to kind of reset, right? Because they're different fighters today than they were back in 2018. Justin Gaethje today, while he still possesses a lot of the same skill set, does many things better, and so does Dustin Poirier. One of the biggest things that I believe that lends itself to them being different is mentally, because they're both now former interim champions. When you wear the UFC championship belt, it gives you a level of confidence that you cannot gain in any other area of fighting, no matter how many people you knock out, no matter how many you submit. The ultimate feeling, the ultimate accomplishment is when Dana White wraps a belt around your waist. Both of these men have felt that. So while the skill sets are very similar but advanced, I believe that the mindset is ultimately what's going to be so different for these two athletes. And I believe that is based on the fact that they have both won a portion, at least, of the UFC title.
Yeah, and I guess the next question I have for you, too, is how difficult is it when you're fighting somebody like you're Orthodox and a person is a southpaw, right? That whole turnaround. Now, I know it's something that people train for and you have your sparring partners and you work with. But it is such a difference when you step in that octagon with somebody that you're just not as used to seeing. And then Poirier is somebody who can actually change that and evolve his style a little bit, which makes him obviously a very dangerous fighter. So how does one adjust to that in the ring as well?
It just changes a lot of things, right? There are a lot of little details in fighting that have to change whenever you fight a person that's southpaw versus orthodox. One, foot placement becomes very important. So your left foot wants to be on the outside of the southpaw's foot. You want to line him up so that you can throw the lead right hand, because now the jab isn't as effective as it normally is. You want to fight behind the jab in most instances, but against the southpaw, that becomes a little bit less of an effective weapon. So you lead with your backhand, then the left hand comes second. So you got to gain foot placement in order to do that. You got to beat that guy to that angle, line him up to throw that punch, and that works on both sides. Now for the southpaw, their power leg becomes a bigger weapon for them because it opens that window. Whereas before, you're throwing more leg kicks. Now the kicks to the body and the head become more open to the southpaw. It's like a game of chess, high level. And everything's working at the speed of light, right? You're trying to make all these adjustments. You're trying to make sure you're doing the right things that are unnatural to you on the fly in a situation where it's all at the speed of light. It is. I fought a few southpaws in my life. It's difficult because your leg kicks don't work as well. It's
Right.
just it's crazy, man. It's fun to try to solve the puzzle, but it does make it very difficult.
And it's a speed of light, and there's always that one moment that if you lose that concentration, next thing you know, you're on the mat. Next thing you know, they're standing over you, waving their hands. So
I'm
the
telling
question
you,
is,
when
go
I fought
ahead.
Jones,
Right.
we were fighting. He's a southpaw. We were going back and forth, and he was throwing kicks to my body because the window was open. I read body one time. He kicked me in the head. Next thing you know, he got the finish. Right. So it's like all these things are happening. I'm fighting. We're fighting at super high level. And then one moment, bang, the kick lands. Next thing you know, fight's over. So it's like you're doing all these things, but that guy is also playing that same game as you. And if you let him get one step ahead of you, you're in trouble. And I think it's the same thing we're going to see between these two this weekend.
Daniel, you talked before about the evolution of these guys from the last time they fought. So taking that in mind, what you've seen out of Justin Gaethje, what you've seen out of Dustin Poirier, and how they've evolved as fighters. I'm not going to put you in too tough of a position because I know, you got to call fights and you got to keep it real. But at the same time, are you leaning a certain way in terms of a prediction right now? Where do you think this fight goes? Do you think it goes to the card? Do you think there is going to be a knockout? Do you think they've evolved to the point where they might be so sophisticated that you might not get the knockout? It might be a decision at the end of the day. How do you see at the end of this day this fight potentially unfolding before us?
So here's the beauty in my job now as a commentator. I don't get to pick fights. So I don't have anybody mad at me ever again.
That's good.
The guys, fighters get mad. They're the most sensitive bunch you've ever met. You see Kevin Durant, how Kevin Durant gets mad when people talk about him? 10 times. That's how mad fighters get when you pick it. 10 times how KD acts on Twitter.
Well, don't pick a side for me, DC. Instead of picking sides and things like that, because I never want to put you in a bad spot. I know that puts you in a bad spot. But do you see this being the kind of situation where I said that one lack of concentration happening and then there's a KO? Or do you think they've become so sophisticated that eventually they have such a good game plan that it's going to go to the cards potentially in the decision?
What's crazy is that if we do go to a decision, it's going to be fun because these two are always in great fights. And even in the first fight, Justin Gaethje did a great job landing those leg kicks on Dustin Poirier. He had Dustin Poirier's legs beat up, and then Dustin landed the counter left hand that ultimately led to the end of the fight. But I believe that today they're both more efficient. Justin isn't as reckless as he was back when they were fighting back in 2018. He still was carrying a bit of that invincibility. He hadn't lost very much in his career. He was a guy that was new to the UFC. Now, this is a guy that has 11 post-fight bonuses and 9 UFC fights. He's always in a fun fight, and we know that Dustin Poirier, he's a Louisiana hard body, right? Same for me, Lafayette, Louisiana.
I know.
This dude's a dog. He's a dog. So I know this is going to be a fun fight. I know that these two dudes are going to lay it out on the line, and I do believe, though, that with the improvements that they have made, that it may be a decision. But even in that decision, I think we are in line for 25 minutes of insanely high-level fighting and just absolute fireworks.
All right. Real quick, before I let you go, what other fight on this card are you super excited to see?
There's a ton of them. But I got to tell you, the co-main event between Alex Pereira making his 205-pound debut against the former champion Jan Blachowicz was always going to be fun. But the fact that Jamal Hill had just relinquished the championship, second light heavyweight champion to relinquish a belt in the last year, it adds more to the fight. Because now it's not only Pereira's first fight there, this is a number one contenders fight. The winner probably will see Yuri Prochazka when he gets back in the octagon. So I believe that that's a fun fight, but now I like the stakes. I'm all about the stakes. When the stakes are high, and that's why I get the heebie-jeebies on my arm, because I understand the stakes in the fight for a championship. I love high stakes. And now this fight also has high stakes. But I mean, the Black Beast, Derek Lewis is fighting. Michael Chiesa is fighting Kevin Holland. There are a number of great fights on this fight card from Utah. And hey, Joe, I don't know if you've ever been to Utah for any type of sporting event.
No.
These people are crazy in terms of fans. I love that we're going back to Salt Lake City. They are there from fight number 1 all the way to the main event. House is packed. It's crazy.
He's going to have all the goosebumps this weekend. You got to watch this fight. We're going to have Mad Lab, Mike Iurato, join us in just a second for his picks from the betting side of things. But DC, thanks for spending some time with us, breaking down these two incredible athletes here at the main event. It's going to be a wild weekend. Go have fun with everybody out there in Utah. Don't let the crazies get after you too much. But again, man, just enjoy the outing there and enjoy UFC 291. And thanks again so much for your time. Again, we return. It's time to look into the betting side of this after the breakdown from the great Daniel Cormier. More Betting Pros right after this. Before we get to our next guest, don't forget about the BettingPros app. It's free. It will help you track all your bets, manage all your funds, and most importantly, give you the best lines anytime for whatever you're looking to invest in the sports world. So make sure you go right now, download the app, and go premium today at bettingpros.com/premium. That way you'll get more access to the best tools on the planet to start betting smarter and not harder, because that, my friends, is where the real action is. So there you have it, everybody. Betting Pros app, go premium today. And let's get moving on to our next segment, looking at how to bet UFC 291. All right, everyone. Great stuff from Daniel Cormier. Now it's time to put that knowledge into some wagering. And of course, who better to do that than Mad Lab himself, Mike Iurato. Mike was with us a few weeks ago, and you broke down the UFC bouts. We've got another one, a big one here, 291. Mike, you got to feel pretty excited about this one. This is a really good card. We talked about this a few weeks ago, that this was going to be one that we were really excited about. And now we've got a great main event. I know Daniel gave us so much great information regarding the main event between Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje. And Dustin Poirier, obviously, having that left-handed style was something we talked about quite a bit. How that could be a challenge again for Justin Gaethje here. And look, these two guys do have a history together, but it was a while ago. We talked about the evolution of that. Right now, looking at the odds, we're going to try to put some of this knowledge into money, because that's what we're here to do at Betting Pros. Right now, Dustin Poirier is a favorite at -150. Justin Gaethje is a underdog at +130. How do you break down this fight from a wagering perspective, Mike?
Well, usually with wagering, I don't like going back more than about 3 fights. But in a situation like this, you know what I mean? When you got two guys that face each other and are so evenly matched when it comes to their styles, when it comes to their mental fortitude, like these guys are two guys that will go into a foxhole and they will fight. Justin Gaethje made a career on dragging you into super deep water to see if you can swim. 80% of the time, the people can't swim. It just so happens Dustin Poirier is the type of guy that can go into those deep waters and swim with him, and he proved that the last time they fought. There have been major changes on the Justin Gaethje side when it comes to the evolution of his fight game. This is a guy who, when he first came into the UFC, I looked at him as a very short-careered guy. It's no secret that this kid does have wrestling in his back pocket, but he does also have 80 or 90% of his fights in the UFC have ended in bonuses, because this guy does like the slang and bang. It's just instinctive for him when he goes into the cage. He does not utilize the wrestling, even though it is in his back pocket. As his career goes on, as you get older, you start realizing that, listen, like, damage isn't cool anymore. Mayweather said it a long time ago, is that taking punches isn't cool, taking damage isn't cool. The best defense, the best offense is sometimes is better defense. So he has really tightened up his style a little bit. He's not so reckless in there. But at the end of the day, a fighter is a fighter is a fighter. And this guy, once he gets hurt, once he gets stung, he bites down on the mouthpiece and he goes. It's instinctive for him. You can't stop it. You could try to make a blueprint for it, but it's just sewn into his fiber. So all that said, the kid has really improved his striking. He has improved his defense. Dustin Poirier, not so much, because he really didn't have to. This is a guy who always had kind of a honed-in style, very good striking, very good off the jab, southpaw. Probably, for my money, one of the best overall boxers in the UFC. The guy's style is kind of seamless. He's got good timing. He's got good jab. He knows when to put it on. He knows when to take it off. And he's got great instinct in the cage as well as durability. The problem I see with Justin Gaethje instinctively, defensively, that he does that I don't like against Dustin Poirier's style is he shells up defensively. And when he shells up, if you watch the tape, he puts his head down. Somebody in boxing did this a long time ago, George Foreman. He used to tend to block this way. Okay, and it's okay for a heavyweight to do that, because these guys are kind of loading up. They're not really throwing dialed-in shots down the center line. However, when he ended up facing someone like Evander Holyfield that was much more calculated, had much more precision, threw down the center line, and that's what gave George Foreman his problems. The same thing with Dustin Poirier. If you watch that fight back and you watch some of the things that Poirier does defensively, he makes you play peekaboo. He knocks on your door, and then he'll stop and he'll wait for you to like open up. And once you open up that window, that's when he starts throwing. He did it with Gaethje in that fight. I believe it was the third round where Justin Gaethje shelled up, put his head down, and Poirier hit him with about 9 jabs in a row that weren't supposed to be effective. It was basically just him tapping, knocking on the door. And then as soon as he opened up his guard and looked up, he caught him with an uppercut and overhand right. So that's something that Gaethje, I don't know if he can fix. He didn't fix it. He didn't have it in that fight when they first fought. And a couple fights later, he still does the same thing. He shells up, he waits for you to stop, and then he unloads. That's not a style that works with Dustin Poirier. I think the line is probably a little bit high. I think it should be kind of close to even, a little bit more of a pick 'em. I do believe Dustin Poirier does deserve to be the favorite. Minus 150 is pushing it a little bit for me, but I just see more of the same in this fight. I see the exact same issue happening. I think that Justin's going to come out. He's going to be firing off those leg kicks. The one adjustment that Poirier needs to make, he needs to learn how to check leg kicks. He didn't check one of those leg kicks in that fight against Justin Gaethje.
And he was also in pain. I mean, you could see him out in the corner and you're rewatching that fight. He's up there, legs are elevated, the ice is on. It was in the 4th round where that knockout happened. But, if not for that, I mean, is that what Gaethje can do again in this fight? Is just continuing to, that's what he loves to do, is assault that lower half. Can he continue to do that effectively before Poirier can find that hole in the defense up top? Like, that's the one thing. I mean, I guess the big question is, that's the only way this fight really gets an upset, right?
Well, yes and no, because there were spots in that fight where he did sting, Poirier. But the thing is, I thought Poirier learned his lesson against Jim Miller when Jim Miller almost crippled him with leg kicks. He literally needed one more leg kick and the fight was over, and he didn't learn his lesson. He still didn't, check leg kicks. However, you're talking about a different animal, Justin Gaethje. This guy has world-class leg kicking ability. When he kicks you, it stings. He's got to check those leg kicks. If he doesn't, then yes, it takes away his movement. He can be in trouble. But I just see this fight kind of patterning in the same way. I think there will be a finish in this fight. I think Poirier is going to end up finding that peekaboo shot that stuns him. He's going to go in. He'll probably not knock him out cold. Like Justin Gaethje is not a guy to tap, not a guy. But I could see this being the same situation where it's kind of just like a TKO stoppage. I'm going to go Dustin Poirier late. But like I said, that line is a little bit too high for my liking. I think you could wait a little bit on it to see if you start getting some Justin Gaethje love. But Dustin Poirier definitely is my official pick for this fight.
And let me tell you, I mean, to stay on top of that too, when you download that BettingPros app, everybody, that allows you to stay on top of the line movement. You also find the best line for this fight at the different betting houses. So again, utilize the tools here at BettingPros. Download the app. It's free. You can set your notifications if you like MMA stuff, you like UFC stuff, and you can get those updates so you can stay on top of it, because you never know. There might be some line movement here late in the week as we push on. So that is Mike's take on the main event. I want to get to some of these secondary, because basically we spent most of the show so far between Daniel and yourself talking about this bout, and it is worthy of discussion. But we also have Jan Blachowicz against Alex Pereira. This one pretty close too. Blachowicz is the favorite at minus 125. Do you have any feelings or leans in this bout? This is for the light heavyweight division.
Yeah, this one intrigues me a little bit because the line seems odd to me. I was expecting Alex Pereira to be the slight favorite. I figured this line would be flipped a little bit. I understand where people are coming from. They're coming from, okay, well, we saw this movie before. We saw Izzy come up to 205 and fight Jan Blachowicz. He got controlled on the ground and he lost. So that's a situation where everyone's kind of pigeonholing in. But what people aren't looking at, they're not looking at that when Izzy came to 205 to fight, he weighed in at 200 pounds, which is unheard of. Which means he didn't have to cut any weight, which also means he stepped into the cage at 200 pounds, where Jan probably stepped in the cage at 225. You're getting a guy in Alex Pereira now who struggles to make 185. He also walks around 235, 240. So when he weighs in at 205, you can guarantee he's coming into that cage between 225 and 230. So he might even be the slightly bigger guy. Another misconception is this Polish power thing that they got going around with Jan Blachowicz. So Jan Blachowicz does not have the power that people think he has. He only has 9 KOs. 2 of his knockouts when he started this run of knockouts, which was 2019, was against Luke Rockhold, who was knocked out 5 or 6 times. And the other one was Corey Anderson, who was knocked out 4 of 6 times. He's got power. He's got good power for a light heavyweight, but he doesn't have this overall brutal power where he's going to be able to stand in a pocket and get into a firefight with Alex Pereira. The one thing you got to worry about Alex Pereira is if Jan takes him down, if he uses that blueprint to take him down and get on top of him, is Alex going to be able to get up? He is working with Glover Teixeira. Obviously, he's Glover's well tuned in, with grappling and wrestling and stuff like that, where he's trying to really tighten up his game. So that's where the fear factor comes in there. But I think this line is wrong. I think Alex Pieta should be the favorite, and I think that he's worthy of a stab here.
Interesting. He's at minus 105 right now, in case you're looking in a lot of spots. So that's an interesting wager there for Alex Pereira. The welterweight bout here, we have Stephen Thompson against Michael Pereira. No relation there, folks, just to keep everybody straight here. That one, again, interesting lines there we could talk about. There's also a lightweight bout with Tony Ferguson and Bobby Green, and then Michael Chiesa, against Kevin Holland. These three remaining bouts, Thompson, Pereira, Ferguson, Green, and Chiesa and Holland. Do you have any strong feelings about some of these right off the gate? I know the Ferguson right now is a heavy underdog there to Green, so I don't know if that's really particularly interesting from a wagering standpoint, but do you see either of these three remaining bouts interesting in terms of the betting odds?
I would say the Stephen Thompson one. I would say the Bobby Green one, it's a little too far out of reach if you're a Bobby Green guy. And I think Tony Ferguson, like I said, this is a guy who, 5 fights in a row, you don't know what you're going to get from him. The guy seems to be, falling off a cliff, which is kind of sad. And the Chiesa fight, he hasn't been, fighting for a while. We know Holland's, holes in his game is his wrestling. But like I said, you really don't know what you're going to get from Chiesa as of right now. So I say the interesting one that if you're going to pick one out of the three to wager on, it'd be the Thompson Pieta one, because at least you know what you're getting from these guys.
Okay, and looking at those odds right now, you got plus 145 from Pereira and minus 170 on the Thompson side of things. So which side are you leaning on, just to be sure?
I'm leaving on the Stephen Thompson side. I just think this is a guy who at 40 years old, he was groomed to be a points fighter since he was a child. Mm-hmm. His style of karate is literally point fighting. Michel Pieta is a guy who is a master in capoeira, which is a form of martial arts that is dance induced with music and stuff like that, which means he needs rhythm and timing. Thompson's not a guy who allows you to get your rhythm and timing down. The path for Michel Pieta, if you're supporting him, is you want him to get this fight to the ground. Thompson's been taken down 12 times in his last 3 affairs, but getting him down isn't that easy. He hasn't been finished. It's not a guy you're going to submit. He's never been submitted before. He's very hard to knock out. And like I said, his style of fighting is very hard to penetrate that shield. I know he's 30. But to me, I think he's the right side of this one. But that the line is a little bit high for me, so it's a situation where I probably would wait to see if Pieta gets a little love on him.
Great stuff as always, Mike. I mean, nobody's better in terms of breaking down these fights and how you can make some money on them. And UFC 291 is coming up. Please go follow Mike Iurato over on the Twitter machine at MadLab MMA. Check out his site. Amazing content there. He does an incredible job breaking down the fights, breaking down the fighters, and showing you how to make some money, and I appreciate his time. Hope you all do too. I want to hear your picks. Drop them below here in the comments on the YouTube channel, and don't forget to subscribe to BettingPros, because when you do, you get an opportunity also to get a 1-year free premium subscription to the best betting tools on the planet to help you cash more bets and bet smarter, not harder. So again, drop a comment below, subscribe to the BettingPros YouTube channel, click that little bell till it goes ding, just like that. That's all you got to do, and you might win a 1-year free premium upgrade. If you don't want to wait, go to bettingpros.com/premium today and just go sign up. Mike, great stuff. As always, I want to thank our guest today, Mike Iurato, and also Daniel Cormier for joining us to discuss UFC 291. Subscribe to Betting Pros wherever you get your pods, and go enjoy the fights this weekend. That'll do it for us, but the story of the game goes on. For Mike, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.